So obviously this video is going to contain a bit of spoilers. If you haven't seen the episode and you don't want to get spoiled, now's the time to tune off. Thank you for giving me the view though. Do leave a thumbs up before you go, please. A super chat that would also be nice. But let's talk about why I absolutely loved the previous episode of Game of Thrones. I already made a live stream about it, but basically I was like the Mad King watching that episode. And I was looking at Dumb and Dumber, the showrunners. It's like, burn it all, burn it all. Because I knew it's going to piss off the feminists. I was 100% sure that it's going to make them livid. And when I say feminists, I don't really mean like women, I mean the people who are into intersectionality pretty much. Like a lot of the critics, a lot of the bloggers, and the people who write movie reviews and TV show reviews, they're going to be absolutely livid. Plus all of the parents that name their daughters Dany or Daenerys or Khaleesi. I guess now it's Hitlerisi. Huh? So I'll tell you why I think feminism and social justice just can't write good stories. Because this is really interesting. I've been looking into this and I genuinely thought about it. It's like there's so many ideologies on planet Earth. And you can use an ideology and write the story using the ideology as a prism. So for example, you can write really good stories using the prism of Islam. There's a lot of cool stories that derive from Islamic culture. You can do the same with Christianity. You can do the same with capitalism. In fact, capitalism created Hollywood. But whenever like the social justice is injected in a product, it stops selling. It's not interesting anymore. It's the death of a franchise. And I genuinely thought why that is. And then I realized the people who are advocates for social justice, all they care about is power. So when I read the book and I read The Witcher, I want to see the adventures that The Witcher goes through. I want to see the character development, how the person starts, the struggles that he goes through, and the end where he arrives. And I basically want to identify, like, the way I identify with the characters is when the characters have flaws, because I have flaws as well, because I'm a human being. So it's a lot more easier for me to identify with the character that is flawed and has, some of the problems that I'm facing. And it's interesting because you want to watch and you want to see how that character is going to overcome those flaws and, maybe get a life lesson out of it. The way a social justice activist looks at a movie or a TV show or any piece of entertainment is different than how I look at it. They look at groups, okay? They look at power dynamics. Who has the power? Who is the oppressor? And who is the person oppressed in that particular work of art? And they use identity politics. So basically, they look at a character from the book and they try to figure out their identity and then put it in an oppression scale. So for example, in the case of Daenerys, she is a woman. That is her identity. And because she is a woman, the person that's judging the book is now trying to suggest that she represents all of womanhood. In other words, if Daenerys has a flaw, like in this case, for example, Daenerys goes crazy, they point out that it's the showrunner that's a misogynist because he is turning a female lead into the stereotypical crazy woman. Okay? So in other words, if you're a writer and you don't want to be labeled misogynist, you don't want to be labeled racist, you don't want to be labeled any of these things, when you create a non-white character, you need to treat them like a Mary Sue, because the moment you give it any negative traits, they will consider that you are a racist or you're a misogynist or whatever. And the characters become boring and stale. So in the case of Game of Thrones, when you read the books, and I genuinely think this is the canon ending, like this is what Martin told the showrunners, that eventually Daenerys is going to go crazy. You realize that in the books there's a lot of hints that it's going to happen. They basically point out that the Targaryens, they practice incest, and in the world of Game of Thrones, incest is not like in our world where it causes genetic defects. But in the world of Game of Thrones, Targaryens, because of incest, they end up going crazy. And Daenerys managing to win all of the battles, managing to have everything handed to her, managing to get all of the praise of the people nonstop throughout the show. In the books, it's suggested that it's destiny guiding her that is achieving this. So when she finally goes to Westeros and the people don't love her anymore, the people are afraid of her. When she uses her armies and her dragon that she sacrifices in order to protect the people, people still don't love her, and in fact all the love goes to Jon Snow rather than her. When Jon Snow rejects her like a man rejects her, that never happened before, and when every single advisor around her betrays her, she goes like, you know what, fuck these people. And she decides to break the wheel by ruling with absolute terror and dread, so that the wheel doesn't turn anymore because no one will be brave enough to challenge her. And the showrunners do a very bad job in portraying this in the movie, in the show, because feminists have co-opted the show. The show used to be very dark. It used to be highlighting how medieval society used to look like. And then the feminists started complaining that, oh, it has depictions of rape. It's like, oh, the female characters are being abused, blah, blah, blah. And instead of developing these characters according to the book and trying to maintain the story the way Martin set it out to be, they started caving into social justice and created Mary Sue after Mary Sue. So you don't see the hints that Daenerys is starting to go cuckoo. You don't really get to see those hints that exist in the books that show her narcissism and show that, you know, she's capable of doing all of these atrocious things. And when they finally use the ending from the book, there's this like dissonance between the show and what the viewers have watched for all this time. And this is why the feminists are absolutely livid, you know, because for them, when you treat the character like this, it symbolizes that the society believes, and by society it's usually the author, that society believes that all women are crazy. Even though it's obvious that no, not all women are crazy. It's just, you know, Daenerys was a Targaryen and who was given everything in her life. And this is actually like a good life lesson. You know, it's something that we used to get in stories. We would read the story and we would get like a life lesson out of it, that if someone is just handed things on a platter without working for them, if someone is just granted all the things, they're going to become a spoiled brat. And in this case, this spoiled brat has access to a dragon, and she doesn't give a single fuck about the people down there. In fact, another thing that I can get from this story is that when, you know, someone is in the air above everything, they don't really get to experience the suffering of the little people. And you get to see this when footage from militaries are being released, and you see like the guy flying the drone or flying the helicopter who's like, oh yeah, I see 4 bogeys, and you know, and he doesn't really feel anything. He doesn't even feel recoil about it. It's like, you know, he just sees some people on the camera, like light them up, you know, and that's it. So, you know, it kind of like takes away from the human aspect of actually doing warfare, because you're so far away from the battlefield, you're just pressing a button on a computer and a drone somewhere just strikes someone. And it's the same with Dany on the dragon, you know, like you could make the argument that she generally does not see the suffering she's causing. She's just flying up high and telling Dracarys to the dragon. It's just, you know, just burning with flame and stuff. And that's interesting, you know, like, and by the way, this was said by premonitions and stuff like that, by, if you look at the previous visions that Bran had, he saw snow over the Iron Throne, and Daenerys also saw this in the House of the Undying. She saw the Iron Throne destroyed and snow everywhere. So people assumed that it's going to be the White Walkers that destroy King's Landing, but in reality, it's ash. So it wasn't ice that destroyed the throne, it was fire. And I guess this is where, Martin might make the comparison that fire and ice, while they oppose each other, they can both be a force for good, or they can also be a force for great evil. Like it's really philosophical. It's all these things, and you can't get it in a story about social justice. Like you don't get these things because social justice deals in absolute. You have good guys and you have bad guys. So, for example, I saw an article with them complaining that the Unsullied and the people of color are being wiped out. And the writer was expecting that the wildlings and the Unsullied and the Dothraki will be called on the small council and be represented in Westeros. And it's like, okay, they're not immigrants. They're invading armies. Like they like to rape and pillage. But again, like through the mind of the social justice, because they're foreign, because they're outside from Westeros, they must be good. Even though the Dothraki, they rape and pillage. It's their main occupations. And when Dany tries to interject and she tries to stop people from raping and pillaging, they challenge the call and they have a death match, because that was like in their culture. Same with the wildlings. Another thing that social justice does to shows, which is also really problematic, is that it brings our morality into the past. So they bring 2019 morality into the past. Like, for example, when Dany burns down the Sam's father and his brother, it's viewed as an act of great evil, like an act of a mad ruler. And it's like, no, like you have to judge it from the timeline and the perspective there. Like, they rose weapons against her. They would have killed her had they won. She manages to defeat them and then gives them the choice to bend the knee. And when they refuse, what do you think Tywin would have done? What do you think Ned Stark would have done? I mean, hell, Jon Snow executes people. Jon Snow cuts the head of the Flint guy, I believe. The one that was the leader of the Golden Cloaks. And then he also executes a child. A kid who also stabbed Jon Snow and was manipulated by people more stronger than him. And he also had like the hatred for wildlings because they burned and they raped and pillaged his village. But yeah, I mean, throughout the book, there's one consistent theme throughout the entire series that war is bad, that no one actually wins a war, and the people who suffered the most are the peasants and the people at the bottom. And if you read the books, you get this thing that, yeah, Dany is not actually Jesus Christ. She's not a savior. She's not, a person that's going to make things better. She's just another person that brings to Westeros what everyone brought to Westeros from her family: fear, fire, and blood. And that's what in the first season you have Robert Baratheon saying, is that the way to hold this realm together is not through love and affection, it's by fear, fire, and blood. So yeah, like there's no way you can read the book and not get that Dany is going to do this. I'm curious if Martin is going to change the ending now because of the backlash. Like, there's going to be massive backlash against this. Like, I guarantee to you, you're going to see articles after articles calling the show sexist, saying that it betrayed feminism, and all of that hogwash. But in reality, it's very it's an interesting and philosophical story. And from the books, it's not like the bad way of subverting your expectation, because you see it coming a mile away. I'm really disappointed that the show did not manage to translate it accurately on the screen, and didn't give the hints there in order for people to see about this thing that will transpire and would take place. Do let me know what you think. Looking forward to seeing from you guys in the comment section.